In the early 20th century, Jewish communities thrived across Europe, contributing vibrantly to diverse societies. They lived as neighbors, friends, and colleagues alongside non-Jewish populations. While anti-Semitism existed, it had not yet escalated to systematic state-sponsored persecution. Life for many was a blend of tradition and modernity. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power in 1933, propagating a hateful ideology. They blamed Jewish people for Germany's economic problems and defeat in World War I. Anti-Semitism became official state policy, fueled by virulent propaganda. A dangerous new era had begun. Shortly after gaining power, the Nazis began enacting discriminatory laws targeting Jewish citizens. Jewish people were systematically removed from civil service jobs and legal professions. Boycotts of Jewish businesses were organized, marking the beginning of their economic marginalization. These initial measures stripped away fundamental rights. In 1935, the infamous Nuremberg laws were passed, further formalizing racial anti-Semitism. These laws stripped German Jews of their citizenship, declaring them subjects of the state. They also prohibited marriages and sexual relations between Jews and Germans. This legislation codified racial discrimination into law. On November 10, 1938, a wave of violent anti-Jewish pogroms swept across Germany and Austria, known as Kristallnacht, or B, Night of Broken Glass. Synagogues were burned, Jewish homes and businesses were vandalized, and thousands of Jewish men were arrested. This state-sponsored violence marked a brutal escalation of persecution. It was a terrifying turning point. Following Kristallnacht, the persecution of Jews intensified dramatically. Many were forced out of their jobs, their property was confiscated, and emigration became increasingly difficult. Jewish children were expelled from public schools, isolating them further. The Nazis sought to make Jewish life impossible in Germany. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, initiating World War II. This invasion brought millions more Jews under Nazi control in Eastern Europe. The war provided cover for the Nazis to escalate their persecution beyond Germany's pre-war borders. A new, terrifying phase of their plan unfolded. After conquering Poland, the Nazis established ghettos, often walled-off sections of cities, to confine Jewish populations. Conditions within these ghettos were horrific, marked by extreme overcrowding, starvation, and disease. Families were crammed into tiny spaces, with little food or sanitation. Life became a daily struggle for survival. Following the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, specialized German killing squads, known as Einsatzgruppen, began mass murder operations. They followed the advancing army, systematically executing Jewish men, women, and children, often shooting them in open pits. These horrific massacres accounted for over 1 million victims. Their methods were brutal and direct. On January 20, 1942, high-ranking Nazi officials gathered at the WWII conference near Berlin. They formalized plans for the opposing final solution to the Jewish question: a systematic extermination plan for European Jewry. This meeting laid out the logistical framework for mass murder on an unprecedented scale. It codified genocide. The final solution was the Nazi euphemism for their systematic, state-sponsored genocide of the Jewish people. This plan aimed to murder every Jewish person within German-occupied territories. It marked a shift from persecution and forced emigration to organized mass murder. The goal was total annihilation. Before the final solution, the Nazis established concentration camps, primarily for political prisoners and undesirables. These camps, like Dachau and Buchenwald, served as sites of forced labor, torture, and brutal conditions. They became instruments of terror and oppression within Nazi Germany. As the final solution progressed, the Nazis built dedicated extermination camps, primarily in occupied Poland. Camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, and Sobibor were designed for efficient mass murder using gas chambers. Millions were sent to these sites with the sole purpose of immediate extermination. They were factories of death. Jewish people from across Europe were rounded up and deported to these camps via crowded freight trains. These journeys often lasted for days, with no food, water, or sanitation, and many died en route. The conditions were inhumane, foreshadowing the horror awaiting them. The trains became instruments of terror. Upon arrival at extermination camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau, victims underwent a brutal selection process. SS doctors immediately determined who was fit for forced labor and who would be sent directly to the gas chambers. Families were ripped apart, often forever, in these horrific moments. This selection decided life or death. For those selected for labor, life in the concentration and extermination camps was an unimaginable ordeal. Prisoners faced starvation, brutal beatings, forced labor, and rampant disease. They were stripped of their dignity, their identities reduced to tattooed numbers. Survival was a daily, desperate fight. Despite the overwhelming odds, acts of resistance occurred both inside and outside the camps. Prisoners sabotaged equipment, organized escapes, and even mounted armed revolts, like the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and the revolts at Treblinka and Sobibor. These acts of courage, though often futile, demonstrated profound human defiance. While Jewish people were the primary target of the Holocaust, the Nazis also systematically persecuted millions of others. Rome, gypsies, homosexuals, disabled individuals, Soviet prisoners of war, and political dissidents were also murdered. Their suffering is an integral part of the Nazi regime's brutality. Amidst the pervasive evil, countless individuals risked their lives to rescue and protect Jewish people and other victims. These brave rescuers hid families, forged documents, and helped people escape Nazi-occupied territories. Their acts of extraordinary courage offer a glimmer of humanity amidst the darkness. As Allied forces advanced in late 1944 and early 1945, the Nazis forced concentration camp prisoners on brutal death marches. Weakened and starved, prisoners were forced to walk hundreds of miles in freezing conditions, many dying along the way. The Nazis sought to erase evidence and prevent liberation. Starting in mid-1944, Allied forces began liberating the concentration and extermination camps, revealing the full horror of the Holocaust to the world. Soviet troops liberated Majdanek and Auschwitz, while American and British forces freed camps like Buchenwald and Dachau. The sheer scale of the atrocity shocked the liberators. Upon entering the camps, Allied soldiers discovered emaciated survivors, piles of unburied bodies, and evidence of gas chambers and crematoria. The horrific scenes left an indelible mark on those who witnessed them. The world finally confronted the unspeakable reality of Nazi genocide. The true extent of the barbarity was revealed. Survivors faced immense challenges, grappling with physical debilitation, profound psychological trauma, and the loss of their families and homes. Millions were displaced across Europe, forming a massive humanitarian crisis. The process of healing and rebuilding shattered lives would take decades. Following the war, the Nuremberg trials were held to prosecute major Nazi war criminals for their atrocities. These trials established international precedents for crimes against humanity and genocide. They sought to hold perpetrators accountable and ensure justice for the victims. The world sought to understand and punish. The Holocaust stands as a stark and enduring warning about the dangers of hatred, prejudice, and unchecked power. Remembrance through education, memorials, and survivor testimonies ensures that such horrors are never forgotten. We learn from this dark chapter to foster tolerance and human dignity for all. Subscribe for more disaster videos.